Being a Day Player, Video 3, Dealing with Direction. In the first video, I talked about that moment when you got the script in a mail. 3 pages, 1 scene. No context, no way of knowing who will be playing the other character or characters. Maybe a brief description of the character, but as they have cast you, at least the morphology must be right. And you remember what you did in the audition, in the self-tape. In between the moment when you receive the script and the day of the shoot, you learn the lines and try, as far as possible, to make acting decisions based on what information you have. Let's create a hypothesis. 1 scene, 3 pages, 2-hander. You behind a desk, firing an employee. Page 90, somewhere in the middle of the film. There is not a lot of context or backstory in those 3 pages. Just the conversation concerning the firing. Why? What have they done or not done? All of this you have to invent as a backstory. I go much deeper into the necessity of a backstory for all screen acting in the last video in the series. So, you make your acting decisions. Which lines to use to get angry and raise your voice? Which lines be quiet, cold and decisive? How to orchestrate your role. All this has to be done alone and in a bit of a vacuum, which for some who have been trained in certain techniques or methods, this might seem a little counterintuitive. The day arrives. You get to the hotel, check in, the call sheet is slipped under your door at around 8 p.m. You are number 2 on the cast list for the day, out of 2, which means basically the entire day is dedicated to this scene. And number 1 is an internationally famous top A-lister. Tomorrow you will have serious status, and you'd better be up to it. It is said that 1 day of shooting represents 1 minute of screen time in the final cut. That is variable, but it is a general rule, so this scene must be important to the story, especially given when it takes place. On set on the day. Remember, the setup is huge. The director is at the head of an operation which involves 100 or more people. Reliant on the first AD to a great extent, nevertheless, his responsibility is for the whole undertaking. His priorities on the day are to make sure that there will be raw footage that can be later edited into meaningful material as the whole film gets stitched together. You can imagine how long that list of priorities is and what they entail. For the purposes of this video, there is one basic question. Where do I fit into all this? The answer is nowhere, except in those moments between action and cut. The rest of the time, you are somebody else's responsibility. In those short, brief moments when you actually get to do what you've been trained to do and are paid for, you enter very much into the director's priority focus. Before that, it is unlikely that you will have met beyond a perfunctory introduction when you arrive on set or as the shot is being set up. As I said, You are not high on his priority list at that moment. And I have to say it. This is where I take issue with a lot of directors. In a few moments, they will be watching you on the monitor during the first rehearsal that I mentioned in the introductory video. Will what they see correspond to their vision? Maybe, and maybe not, making it a hit and miss situation as far as you are concerned. In all my years of doing this, only once or twice has a director ever outlined what he is looking for before that first rehearsal. At that moment, you are not up there on his priority list, and so essentially the director pays you little attention. I understand, in human terms, why this is so, there being so many other things going on which one could consider to be more important. I do feel, however, that it is disrespectful to our craft and also inefficient. I would like to take this opportunity, if I may, to address any directors who may be watching this. In our workshops and masterclasses, we are told to be aware of what the director needs from us. What is never addressed is what we need from directors, which is clarity, context, and above all, notice. Acting does not happen instantly. It takes time and preparation. I have, on numerous occasions, been given direction which requires a total rethink, and I have been asked to go places, emotionally, in an instant's notice. I will talk about this in a moment. In both the first and second videos, I talked about the first rehearsal. Now, a great deal happens at that moment, because what has been simply a concept in the director's mind now becomes a reality. It's a very important moment for everyone on the team. Sound, lights, camera, etc. Everybody takes away information from that moment, and adjustments that are deemed necessary are dealt with. And that includes you. The first thing to remember is that this is not a rehearsal as you might understand it from workshops and masterclasses. It has nothing to do with acting, and everything to do with all the technical requirements, size of frame, depth of field, lighting, sound, and so on. Nevertheless, as the director watches it on the monitor, he is not only watching for the image in general, but this is the first time he gets to see what you intend to do with the script. As far as you are concerned, remember, you are now very high on his priority list, being in front of his eyes on the screen and in his ears in the headphones. So it is important to show him exactly what you have prepared. Do not walk through it, not acting because it's not a take. He needs to see what you are proposing as a final result. Remember, he is looking at the scene as a whole, and so he needs to know whether what you are going to do fits with his conception. From your subjective point of view, two different things may happen after that first rehearsal. One is that you get absolutely no feedback from him, or anyone else for that matter, whatsoever. In a way, this is the best possible outcome for you. The director's responsibility is to the scene in its entirety. If what you have just shown him fits in with his vision, then there is nothing more for him to add. Some directors have the grace to say great stuff as they pass by you, dealing with a different problem that needs to be resolved. Others just ignore you totally. Or maybe you will get some direction. The first thing to take into account here is that it is not about your performance or interpretation. The director is looking at the scene as a whole, not at your performance as an actor. This is not like the notes you get from your masterclass or workshop tutor concerning the art of acting or even the craft. The indications or direction are about making the scene work as the director sees it. Now that will include the context within the story of the film, which you do not have access to unless he explains it. Rhythm. Does this scene come before or after a high action sequence, for example? So he might give you a note about pacing, faster, slower, etc. He won't give you a reason, and it has nothing to do with your performance. It's just that he needs this scene to go a bit slower because of what happens before or after, leaving you with an acting dilemma. Slow it down. Why? In motivation terms. All those exercises to create truth in your work are now subject to a totally arbitrary external requirement, which has to be respected. This is where technique comes into play. You do not know why he wants it slower. It almost certainly has nothing to do with your performance, but you have to do it slower. Just a note here, increasing the pace can always be achieved in the editing studio. Slowing it down is possible, but very much more difficult and time-consuming. How do I slow it down? I'll deal with that in the next video. I've had myriads of notes from directors, some simple and clear, some incomprehensible, and some so vague as to be almost esoteric. Be more open is one of my favourites. One thing you will not get the opportunity to do is to question, what do you mean by that? He will give you the note and then walk off to solve another issue without giving you a chance to respond. So, let's go back to my hypothesis scenario. Depending on the A-lister, it is possible that the first rehearsal will be with an intern or a stand-in. First rehearsal, everybody. You follow your blocking, the intern comes in and delivers the A-lister's lines. You do yours as you have prepared, and cut. The director approaches you on set. This character is a very weak man and is being forced to fire this employee very much against his will. Okay? And he walks off to talk to somebody else. Everybody, when you're ready, second rehearsal. Now you were left sitting there behind the desk, trying to digest that, and you have about 30 seconds to change everything you have prepared. This may seem exaggerated, but I have been thrown curved balls like that on several occasions. So what do you do? Firstly, of course, do not panic. You have 30 seconds to resolve this, and you need a very clear head and a rational approach. Go into that headspace in your character. Quite simply, before the next rehearsal, say it in your head, or out loud if there is nobody in hearing distance. I'm a weak man, and I am only firing this person because my boss is forcing me to. You will not have the time to create a full backstory, but if you let that phrase run through your head repeatedly, the camera will pick it up. especially as it will be apparent to the audience due to the context. Another way to keep the director happy is to move all the pauses around, giving the impression that the character is hesitating. Techniques which I talk about in the next video, along with how to make gestures look weak or strong. The bottom line is, if there is not something going on in your mind, the eyes go dead. And also, if what is going on in your head is panic, the camera will see that. So, to suppress the panic, use the words that the director gave you when he gave you the note. Many directors do not really understand acting and how it works, and the direction can sometimes seem odd and totally at variance with what you prepared. As I said, directions are rarely about performance or even interpretation. They are about what the director needs to make the scene work. How they express that to the actor can often be very obscure. Being able to adapt quickly and efficiently becomes easier with experience and technique. The most reliable technique is to abandon everything you have prepared and use the phrase he has given you, running it as a mantra through your head as you play the scene. It will keep your eyes alive and a visible intention. And that is what counts above all.